Hello there and welcome back to this video. So the 1857 revolt, also called the First War of Independence, proved to be quite a nightmare for the British. It also marked the end of the East India Company's rule of the Indian subcontinent, and the British crown or the British Queen took over the control of this land. Now, the census that began from 1871 was very instrumental in establishing the British Raj. They were able to identify who was who in this population. The census meant that the borders, the boundaries, and the identities of the people were rigidified and codified. It made them much more governable, easily governable, and also taxable, which was very important for the British. But it also rendered a very large, complex, and regionally diverse system of faiths and social identities simplified to a degree that probably has no parallel in the world history. Entirely new categories and hierarchies were created. Incompatible or mismatched parts were stuffed together. New boundaries were created and flexible boundaries hardened. Now, right from our schools and then colleges and the general public discourse also, we are made to believe, or we are told, that the caste system emerged from the Varna jati system. Varnas are mentioned in the ancient scriptures, and jatis are the categories that you see in the ground, sometimes also called as caste. But the word caste itself comes from the Portuguese word casta. Therefore, the word caste itself is foreign. But the caste as we know today is a highly segregated hierarchical category which is determined at birth, and we simply cannot change that. And it is also endogamous in nature. But what if that wasn't how it had been in the pre-colonial times? What if the caste system as we know today was completely created by the British Raj? So that is what we will look at in this video. So let's get into that. Every week I go through the trouble of finding an interesting topic through keyword research, but this video was suggested by someone. His name is Prajit Prem Kumar Kurup. So if you have more suggestions, please let me know in the comment section, or you can also message me on LinkedIn or Instagram. I check the messages there also. And if you liked the content in my channel, please do subscribe because I post every week. Once again, thank you for suggesting this video. Well, it goes without saying that I don't have a sponsor yet. But not to worry, I will sponsor my own video. More precisely, my book will. This is the first book that I wrote. It's a realistic fiction novel about 4 teens in a city enmeshed in a life of drugs, love, violence, and chaos. A tale of isolation and desperation one feels among known strangers in an unknown city. Well, this book is available on Amazon and Flipkart. The links will be in the description. I will also share the link to the video trailer of the book. So check them out. And now back to the video. The Varna system, which includes the 4 Varnas, which are the Brahmins, who are the spiritual priests or academicians, the Kshatriyas, who are the warriors or the ruling class, the Vaishyas, who are the merchants or the industrialists, and the Shudras, who were the agriculturalists. This categorization of the Indian population can be seen from as early as the Rig Veda, and it is reflected in the Itihasas, the Dharmashastras, the Puranas, and all the subsequent literary works that happened in the subcontinent. But even in Manusmriti, which is the most controversial book on the subject, doesn't say that the Varnas are determined at birth or ascribed to them. It is determined more on the lines of the gunas of the individual, are they Rajasmic, Sattvic or Tamasic, and also on the karmas of their past lives and this life, and also on the aptitude or the temperament of that individual. And you could change your Varnas within the lifetime according to what you were doing at the time. But then the Brahmins, at least a section of them, tried to claim that they were superior because of their intellectual and their spiritual abilities, and they did try to keep people out from a lot of opportunities. But that was relevant only in the spiritual or the religious or even at least political realms, and it was largely based on literary works or texts or the spiritual ritualistic practices. In real life, in the ground reality, it was more about the thousands of jatis that had already formed in the subcontinent and not as much to do with the Varnas. And we have also seen a lot of resistance and defense against the Brahmanical supremacy throughout the centuries and millennia, which I have talked about in earlier videos. So if you are interested, please do check them out. Now the jatis and the Varna system, which morphed into the caste system, were all were equated thanks to the foreign sociologists and anthropologists who were studying this subcontinent. They had already translated a lot of Sanskrit text into English and other Western languages, and they started to view and understand the Indian society and cultures according to what they had understood from the texts. And in that way, Jati and Varna and caste all became the same thing. The pre-colonial Indian society was much more complex, diverse, and even not as hierarchical as it was thought to be. The East India Company and then the British really had India by its throat, but they did not want any resistance, and they did everything in their power to ensure that. The single most important problem faced by the British was that the Indian population was much too vibrant and diverse and complex to be governed as one mass of land. There were vibrant communities that included pastoralists, tribals who lived in the forest, completely dependent on the forest. And even the sedentary populations were completely self-sufficient, and they had way too much freedom. So the British just did not like that. They wanted a more structured, sedentary population that was much more trackable and governable and taxable, and a population that was dependent on their goods and services rather than being self-sufficient and smarter than them. So that's exactly what they went on to create in India. Because of how heterogeneous the jatis were and how Indians understood their own jatis or their own identities, W.C. Plowden, who was the census commissioner, had no idea how to codify and enumerate these people in the census. And the governor of Bengal appoints H.H. Risley in 1885 to conduct a survey of caste and occupations of the people of the province. H.H. Risley or Risley goes on to become the next census commissioner in 1901. Caste was not a matter of occupation or status or function, but of race. The origin of caste, he believed, was distinctly racial, and it was the struggle of Arya to keep out the dark races. The Aryan invasion theory, Max Muller, John Mills, all becomes very significant in this theory, where they basically said that there were already a darker Dravidian population living here when the Aryans came from the Iran, and so they had to segregate themselves, and that's how the caste system began. But still, they really did not have a clear idea of what caste was. What they basically did was that they clubbed together different sets of people according to their occupation or the function that they did in the society, or based on the cultural practices or the geographical location where they lived. Basically, sets of communities were brought together, possibly with different jatis, and they were given a clear boundary and hierarchy according to the Varna system that the Western ethnographers and sociologists learned from the ancient text, and that became the norm that we follow to this day. Basically, they created a template or a framework based on very loosely connected society, and then they fit in the communities into that framework. Sometimes even excluded communities because there was no way to fit them in, and then they called it a system, which is the caste system. The Brahmin caste is the best example for that, because there are too many jatis or subcastes, what we call subcaste, in one Brahmin caste, and they are wildly different from each other. There are castes who own land, there are subcastes who own lands, there are subcastes who actually do menial ritualistic practices, who are actually discriminated against in the society, but they are all clubbed together as the upper caste, one brand name of Brahmin caste. Nair societies are another great example. They should be rightly called a population rather than a caste, because they really have no one occupation, one status, one function. There are agriculturals, landowners, everything inside the Nair caste. But yet again, they are all clubbed together under one label. The census was not just a statistical endeavor for understanding the population, but the entire administration of British Raj was going to be based on this census, which was heavily influenced by caste system. Now, we know that the British have always favored the Brahmins, the Kshatriyas and the Vaishyas, who are the wealthy landowners, chieftains, kings and so on. Be it in education, in administrative roles or any opportunities, the upper caste got most of it. The British devised something that is called the martial races after the 1857 war, where the British saw severe resistance from some communities in some regions while others did not act at all. We know that the 1857 revolt also happened from the military army units, so any community or race that did not start an uprising against the company became the martial race, and anybody who actually revolted against them were punished, were suppressed, and they were not martial races. And then in 1909, the Morley-Minto reforms happened, which had one purpose: to divide India into 1,000 pieces, rendering it much divisive, much more controllable and not united within ourselves. So the Bengal partition happened after the Morley-Minto reforms. The separate electorates for depressed classes or lower classes was also talked about in the Morley-Minto reforms. Now, it's also true that the British have really tried to uplift what they call the depressed caste, or today they are called the scheduled castes. They did try to eliminate the social evils of untouchability, or they stood behind those individuals who tried to eliminate such social evils. We cannot overlook that at all. In this backdrop, if you really understand what Rahul Gandhi was proposing in their election manifesto, he really wanted to redo or do a caste census and uplift the backward classes that he identifies. How devastating it would have been for the fabric of this nation if we are to reintroduce a faulty system that has been failing India for all this time. Once again, when I say that caste system was created by the British, it does not mean that India or Bharat was not stratified or hierarchical in nature. There were definitely hierarchies and there were definitely dominant caste or dominant classes and less fortunate underprivileged castes and classes across India. We are not denying that. But if this framework or template of caste system was not set in place, solving or equalizing this hierarchy could have been much easier. So basically, caste system, as long as it exists, will continue to divide the Indian population, be it of any religion, and it will continue to stand against the best interests of Indians. So next time somebody talks to you about the caste system or how you are supposed to marry within your caste, tell them that it was all a British plot to rule us after all. So let me know what you think in the comment section. Don't forget to subscribe, and until we meet next time, bye bye. Have an awesome time.